Welcome to another Sunday Satsang. I hope you guys can hear me okay. Maybe a thumbs up because there's some construction going on outside. So just want to make sure it's not welcome too much audible to another Sunday. Great. Lovely. Thank you. Well, every Sunday when the satsang is on, I find my system sort of contemplating on different angles or topics or scenarios which seem to come up as useful or worthy of discussion, of sharing. And today, there's no particular topic that came up today for this satsang. And yet, as the space opens up with all of you, what seems to be coming is the word soften. Softening ourselves, and just beginning right from where we are in this moment. If we just came from a work call, or just were sleeping and just woke up, or just came from outside after meeting friends or family, whatever, wherever we find ourselves in this moment, just right here, is it possible to soften, to relax? And maybe physically, maybe that's what we need, that we may find there are some tight areas of the body where attention may go, and an intentional softening of that area may happen. The softening of the gaze, rather than looking at maybe my face here or whatever we might be focusing on visually in this moment. If it's possible to just take that attention a little back and wide. Softening the focus visually and even mentally. Not trying to grasp anything. And if there is a grasping that might be going on in the body, a clenching, a holding on, just letting it show up in our field of awareness, field of attention. And as we're just with it, without really trying to manipulate it or soften it, if we can just be with it as it is, the beingness of being with the tightness or the grip, the holding on, that beingness part is the softening itself. The beingness which is not adulterated with judgment, or look at me, I can't even soften my body, or oh wow, look how wonderfully I'm able to follow instructions, or oh well, I don't need all of this. So all of these narratives, when are absent or are visible from this beingness, that beingness itself is the softening, which doesn't need to soften. It can never be stiff or tight or gross. It's fluid in a way. It's like space. And yet the space is perceived within this beingness, which is awareness. And this awareness is not only aware of itself, within this awareness, everything that is here in this moment, including our body and relationships and this room that we are sitting in, the walls, the chairs, the computer screen, my voice, everything that is being awared is within the awareness. If someone would just knock my head right now with a bat, and if I were to go unconscious, everything that is being aware of won't exist anymore. And we experience this every night in deep sleep. There's nothing in deep sleep. Softening, surrender. The moment there is an okayness, with everything that may be arising, the seeming past, the present, and the imaginary future, the storyline. There can be an okayness with the uniqueness of all of it, the aloneness of all of it. That's softening. from this place of okayness. And sometimes this okayness is not unconditional. It may start like, I don't like what's here. I don't like what I'm going through, but what to do? It is here. So initially, it may even feel like a defeat, a hopelessness, choicelessness of having tried everything to get rid of something. And yet it still is alive in our situation or in our storyline, in our experience. So initially, the okayness may very simply just be, you know what, I give up. I have no clue what to do. And that is the beginning of the softening, the surrender. And from this place, it is ever more so effective to look at the situation that's at hand, rather than looking at it from within the situation as the victim or the culprit or the savior or whatever role we have identified with in a certain situation. If it's possible to just step back and look at all those roles, look at our role, and then assess the situation from a third eye or a bird's eye perspective from outside of the situation. And that can happen when the attachment to a certain outcome from that certain situation that needs to be looked at, when the attachment that the outcome needs to be a certain way is given up. Given up enough to not get sucked into the identification with a certain perspective, and the openness to look at the whole of it, whatever it is, from a wide angle. And looking at what is from a wide angle, a solution may come or not, or a solution may come that we never would have expected, or something just falls away, that the situation is not as it is anymore. When we disengage from playing a particular role in a situation that maybe even includes the others in a certain equation, when there's a disengagement of playing a certain part and poking the other in a certain way out of a habitual pattern, when that shifts from within, when we are not capable of playing that role anymore, the situation may just fall away altogether, or it may morph into something else, which again would be either including us identifying again with a different role and playing a certain dynamic, or if an openness, an okayness, a softening is available, then whatever situation it may be, from that openness, it plays itself out. The situation plays itself out. And it, even initially, when we're building a muscle to be able to stay wide angled and look and live from a place of okayness, where we're not needing to prove a point, we're not needing for the other to get us, to respect us, to love us, to approve of us, where we're not trying to force a certain outcome out of a relationship or a situation or an event. It even seems miraculous. It's like, oh wow, when there's no interference from my side, it just unfolds on itself magically somehow. And not that I stop participating in the situation, but that participation now is not coming from a place of, why don't you get it? And that participation may come from a place of, well, let's see where it goes. Let's see what I end up doing, and let's see how it unfolds. And as that starts happening, even in the, let's say, 1 second or 1 minute a day, or in just one conversation out of, say, 10 conversations, or even when within a conversation, we might be totally identified while having an argument or a debate. And while we are engaged completely, something may just shift inside and say, oh, I don't have to be like this. And another choice may just become available where we can just step back into this beingness aspect of relating to what's going on, relating to what is in this moment. And the conversation may just shift altogether where I'm not coming from a place of, oh, I'm right and you're wrong. And the place may just shift completely attitudinally that, oh, what's the problem? And let's just come together and see if we can discuss that and solve that. The capacity to be triggered falls away in that moment. And that already, if we have experienced it at some point of our life in one relationship or another, and relationship not just with another human, but in a relationship with an object even, or let's say a work project or anything. And if we find ourselves not afraid to lose whatever outcome we were programmed to be attached to, that is what translates as peace of mind in daily living. A way of life where there's no shame, there's no blame, there's no pride, there's no worry or anxiety about the future. There are no expectations in the sense that if those expectations are not fulfilled, I won't be able to survive. And existentially speaking, because of course we need food and air and water to survive, and many other things probably. In today's world, we may even say that if there's no Wi-Fi, I may not survive. Jokes apart, but and there is no attachment to outcome. There is no sense of existential need for the flow of life to be a certain way so I can be at peace. And in the absence of these movements, these dynamics, life is still lived the same way. We still get old. We still fight illness. We still find success at work or in love or internally. We do have breakthroughs where we get to know each other, we get to know ourselves more and more deeply, and the unfolding never ends. And yet, life is now related from a place of openness, a softening, a surrender. A place where it is known that it's okay. Whatever it is, it's okay. It may not be favorable, it may not be pleasurable, but it's okay. We may need to do something about a certain situation, take an action, take a stand. And that can be taken without attachment to outcome and without a fear of what will the other think of me or what will I think of myself, or a fear of losing for that matter, because it's not about winning or losing anymore. It's just life unfolding moment after moment after moment, one way, the predestined way, where I'm not the doer, the other is not the doer, there is no doer. The other delivers pleasure or pain to me is my own destiny of whatever share of pleasure and pain is destined for me to experience in this life. And that other is an instrument through which that predestined share of pleasure and pain is being delivered to me. And my reaction to that pain or pleasure, or the instrument through which it was delivered, is also one way, the predestined way. Because, like the other, I am also an instrument of life through whom pain or pleasure is delivered to itself, to the other. So the shame game or the blame game stops making sense. And that is peace of mind in daily living. Because my day, my life, my experience is not filled with hurt or anger or resentment anymore. And now it's just the beingness, awareness, playing within which everything arises, plays, falls away, morphs into arising something else, playing, falling away. Joy may arise, sadness may arise. And until the suffering is not over, even shame and blame may arise. And yet, there is a possibility to meet the leftover suffering from this availability, this openness, this unconditional okayness. Whatever arises, including the suffering, is okay. What if there was no fixing required? Let's just entertain this pointer that let's just, experiment with this concept that what if there is no fixing required? Is it possible to accept this statement and just let it all go for a moment? Whatever may be going on in our lives, and we may feel that, oh, this problem needs to be solved, and very much so. It may be. It's not to deny that it doesn't need to be solved, but if it's possible that just in this moment, while we are here together, can we accept to experiment with the fact that in this moment, nothing needs to be fixed. I'm just here in a satsang, or I'm watching a video if you're on live stream. And in this moment, whatever that big problem is, needs no fixing. And maybe we physically sigh out. It's like breathing in and just coming back here, letting whatever was going on before this meeting and whatever needs to happen after this meeting, just letting it be. There's no need to forget it, and there's no need to remember it. Let's just come back without an agenda. Without any goal in our mind that, oh, I want to feel better, or I want to feel at peace, or I want to feel bliss. Let's just leave those agendas as they are. And just come back. I did mention that we can just leave our problems as they are in this moment without feeling the need to fix them in this moment, because sometimes we feel guilty to drop them even for a moment because, well, oh, how can I not think about my parent, let's say, if they are not keeping well physically or in some other way? Or how can I not think about a certain relationship which is um, not as harmonious as we would like it to be? And in this moment, if we have really found a place where even thinking about that issue or problem can be left as it is, I also want to encourage that if there's any joyful thing going on, any celebration or the idea of success that may be present in our system in this moment, let's say we got a promotion today and I can't stop thinking about it, or I won an award today, or I found the love of my life today and I can't stop thinking about them. So even the pleasurable content that might be present in our system in this moment, not just the painful stuff, is it possible to leave that as it is also without really engaging in it, without really feeling that, oh, I can't stop thinking about it? What if you can in this moment, just for this moment? And after the meeting, we can pick it right back up and dance with it, enjoy it, celebrate it. In this moment, if we are not already dancing, well, which we could be, if it's possible to leave the topics that are the highlight of our experience in this moment, pleasurable or painful, not denying the amount of pleasure or the intensity of pain that they deliver. But there is a possibility to really step back from identifying with the pleasure and the pain as the only reality of our experience. And stepping back may show that the pleasure and pain is the content of the stepping backness, which is the very awareness, the very beingness within which the pleasure and pain are playing and are being experienced, including the enjoyment of the pleasure and the endurance of the pain. The very breath is happening on its own within this field of stepping back. And it itself is is we name it consciousness or awareness, isness, amness, but there's really nothing that can be said about it or there is really no label for it that can completely label it in its totality, because it itself is the totality. There's no boundary, no end, no beginning. All that can be said is that it is. The label presence can be given to it. It itself is always is presence, unchanging, and yet fresh. It's ever new. Even the concept of new and not new or old doesn't apply here. And whether what we call our eyes are open or closed, whether we're moving or even talking, whatever might be going on in this outer appearance of life, this always is here. Even if we were to forget that this is the very source of the appearance of life, including me and the other. As this unveils itself to itself, in the seeking world or from the seeking perspective, this experientially recognized can be labeled as the truth, as what is always, timelessly, as this which is undeniable. And a grounding in thisness or isness or beingness is the very softening that we as this person within the content of life were looking for to be available. And as we may have experienced in this moment, it is always here. however unavailable or absent it may seem to be, the very fact that I am here and life is being experienced and life is here is already the proof that the source is here. There's no human being that would be alive or living a life without having another human being having given birth to them. So Gurleen sitting here is a product of her father and her mother. So the very fact that Gurleen exists means that the father and the mother exist or existed. This is a very, I can say, vague or superficial analogy to the consciousness is here, whether or not the child, the person, the content finds it available, accessible, or even if the person's not interested in the idea of the source of itself and is just fully engaged and involved in the colors and dances of the content, even then, this is here, always, undeniably. And as we shift towards our question and answer space of the meeting or conversation time, just check for yourself. Is there a point where this leaves? Is it possible to not be aware? Is it possible for beingness, the aliveness that is the very base, the very foundation of every pattern, every thinking, every emotion, the body, every color of experience? At what moment does this become absent? The very beingness itself. Check for yourself. If anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to raise your electronic hand on Zoom and we can chat. Ranko.
Hi, Gulin.
Hello, Ranko. How are you?
I'm nice. And you?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, for me, interesting point is when you say to relax and to soften. So in the beginning, I think maybe every seeker has that issue because when we hear it intellectually, we will interpret it as an instruction, something to do. And then you are trying to do something and it's not working. And you are not sure, maybe it's working, maybe it's not working. So what is happening? All the other seekers got it, but I'm not getting it. So what is happening really? And the funny thing is when we see that it won't work, and then this moment of surrender happens. This is the only moment where we can really see what is really happening. So this is very funny, very amazing in a way, this mechanism. because we are living in this reality of mind, which is kind of separate reality. And the only way that we can went out from that reality is when that reality crumbles. Even for a second. That second is needed, actually. That's grace. And without that second, we can't really go on. So for me, very, very amazing mechanism. And
Yes, yes. What a miracle for
yeah,
it to land on itself.
yeah,
Yeah. And as it lands on itself, it just becomes like how it has never been any other way. And that's why it's so funny.
yeah,
It's like all my life I've been looking for God, only to realize that God already was here, and the one looking for God is just a fictitious movement within God. And as that really lands on itself, as God really becomes aware of God's self, the seeker, the one that was so religiously and passionately life and death situation wise was looking for God, can just laugh and sob at the same time, because it's really a tragic joke.
yeah. We forgot base reality, reality that connects all the other realities, separate realities that we created, and it's all the time there, all the time.
Yes, yes,
You can't really see it.
yes.
Yeah, amazing.
Yes, and the point that you mentioned, that the softening or the encouragement to relax or surrender is taken as a prescription or something to do. And that is where, and inevitably, we have to make an effort, because that's all we know. And we make an effort to not make an effort. And at the end, we're just sick and tired. It's like, you know what? I've tried everything. I have no idea what to do. And that tiredness or giving up is really what the instruction or the encouragement was about. But we have to use all our resources before we can truly give up. And that giving up itself is the relaxation, which initially may very well be experienced as a failure or a tiredness or a, disillusionment, that what's the point? And inevitably, if by God's grace, if it's destined, it can shift into exactly what freedom points to. So what felt like or was seen as the biggest failure in life was the very opening up that we have been working towards and thought we are failing at.
Yeah, because we can't really recognize it experientially in our experience. So we have idea how this experience should look like. And we are just trying to find that experience, whatever means is necessary. But it looks actually totally different, something unexpected, totally unexpected.
Thankfully, right?
At the end, we are very surprised.
Yes. Yes. And that is why it becomes so important to realize and to really, for this to land in our systems, that whatever we may think we are looking for is just a concept. We really don't know what it's going to look like. And generally, what it looks like is a failure. It's like, oh, there's no point in looking for anything. And maybe that's what we call dark night of the soul. We're there, but it still feels dry because, well, that's not what I thought it's going to be. So I'm still holding on to my idea of what it should look like. And even though I'm already on the top of the mountain, I'm still feeling like this is the desert, because my idea of the top of the mountain was something different. And until my idea is fulfilled, which is again attachment to outcome, I am not happy. And then when it really lands, when we look down and we look, and we look up, there's like, oh, there's no further up to climb. So this must be the top of the mountain. So it's not even that we experience that, oh, this is what top of the mountain feels like. It's like you look up, you look down, And you look at your surroundings like, oh, this must be the top because there's nowhere further up to go. And that's when it lands, oh, I must let go of my idea. And this is not as fireworks or, that when I reach the top of the mountain, there'll be like a party going on and everybody will be celebrating me. You made it. There's none of that. And our idea may include that very subtly, that, oh, I would know when I get there. And the realization really is there's nowhere to get and there's no one to get anywhere. And that's not as flowery for the one who's trying to get somewhere. So the more I feel humbled and initially even disappointed in my search, that probably is the growth.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Rako. Thank you. Timsy. Hello, Timsy. I'm not sure if you're speaking yet or not, but you're not audible. Timsy, maybe I'm going to mute you for now. And we'll just take Shiv first. And hopefully you can look at your audio and we can talk again. Oh, there you are. Let's see if it works now, actually.
Hello.
Hi, Timsy. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's so good to see you.
Same here. Hmm. So this was really nice today because I was just thinking yesterday that there is some little bits of like 2, 3 parts of the puzzle that I have little grasp on, like the non-doership and the yoga aspect. The one that I constantly struggle with is the beingness and just what taste it has, what essence it has. Maybe I tasted like sometime, but I just don't have the memory of it. I feel like I'm looking for something I don't even know what it looks like, and I'm keeping on looking. Um, so maybe that failure is like a starting point, so that's good to know. um, Something that I was pondering on lately is I was just kind of thinking through like a personal thing, and although although I don't feel the burden to make a decision as much as I did before, but often I'm confronted with the question if this is my biological preference or this is something coming from the psychological suffering. And maybe there's so much emotional load that I'm not able to decipher it, and was thinking if there's something that can be spoken to that can bring some clarity, would be nice.
Great. That's a wonderful question, actually. That gives me an opportunity to really, you might have a longer answer, is what I'm trying to say in sweeter words.
That is amazing.
Because this gives
That's
me
awesome.
an opportunity to really talk about biological self and psychological self, because I
Yeah.
haven't really explained these labels before, maybe in our talks. So, but because we're both aware of Rogers' framework, so we both know what that means. So for everybody else's sake, I want to elaborate on that before I talk about how, like, if there's a way to navigate where it's coming from. So as we have many times come across the concept that the flow of life is pleasure or pain. That is the spectrum within which life unfolds. Now, pleasure and pain are based on my biological makeup, which basically is a combination of my genes and my conditioning. So my system prefers warmer temperatures. And when I am put into winter temperatures, I can survive, but it's not my preference. I would rather be warmer, biologically speaking, physically speaking, for my body than being in colder temperatures. So that would be a biological preference. And that's why if I'm living with my husband who likes to be in colder temperatures, then we keep on fighting about the AC temperature. So that would be something that's based on preference. I am a sweet tooth, let's say. So my preference is to eat sweet foods over, say, sour foods or spicy foods. So that all of those things would be preferences. However, the psychological load or the psychological suffering would mean the very separate self that is created, again, as the flow of life inevitably, which is based on the attitude of personal doership and attachment to outcome. So as we were born as humans and were growing up, inevitably this sense of I am the doer, you're the doer, and whatever you do, speak, or say is your responsibility, and whatever I do, speak, or say is my responsibility. And as a consequence of this structure, the shame and guilt for my own actions when they deliver pain, the blame and resentment that arises for the pain that is delivered by the other, the pride and arrogance that is a result of the good outcomes or the pleasure that happens to happen out of my actions, words, or attitude, and is taken ownership of as a doer of my doing. Worry and anxiety about the future, about the flow of life, that this is how it should be. Because my happiness, my completeness, what I'm really looking for is to be found in how my life turns out, how you turn out, how I turn out, and how life turns out. The element of expectations that I should be this way, the other should be this way, life should be this way, God should be doing this and shouldn't be doing that. And attachment to outcome. When those expectations are delivered, there's this existential like hurt or even blame towards life in a way that, why me? Or this couldn't have happened. How am I ever going to get out of something like this? All of these narratives conceptually as a thought construct, but you can say solid enough that that is what our sense of identity becomes. I am Gurleen, and I am looking for approval, and consciously, subconsciously, or unconsciously, I become a people pleaser. So I, as a seeker, when the journey starts, for me as Gurleen, the seeker now, it becomes challenging in a way that I don't know if I am people pleasing right now, because my need for approval is really solid within my system. And that is where I have been acting out from for the past however many years I've been living. And or is it my preference to talk nicely to this person, for example, taking this example of people pleasing. So am I being nice to this person, this new person that I met, because out of preference, because they are a certain way that I prefer people to be or my friend to be? Or am I just people pleasing out of my need for approval because I can't take that stranger to reject me? So it is a very valid question that, let's say in decision making, or if we are let's say, at crossroads, and we're looking this way and we're looking this way, and they both have their plus and minus. I want to do this, let's say. And how do we know if I want to do this to fulfill my need for approval? Working with the same example that I used for explaining the psychological self movement. So do I want to go this way to fulfill that psychological self need that it thinks needs to be fulfilled so I can be happy, which is a misunderstanding? Or I want to go this way because this is what I prefer. And what may help, actually, before I even say what may help, I want to point out that whether we take this way or whether we take that way, or whether we just keep standing here looking at both the ways for, let's say, a day, a week, a month, a year, or whole lifetime, is a happening and not our doing. So first of all, whatever is happening in this moment is this way, and whether a route or a decision will be made or a route will be chosen is and will be that way. So the reason of really pointing this out before even talking practically about decision making is to really land in the system that it's not my responsibility to come out with the right decision. So when we really are asking ourselves that whether this is coming from psychological suffering or biological self, at a certain point, it doesn't matter. Who cares? Because whatever decision will be taken, will be taken. And whatever consequence that decision will have is exactly what consequence will be there. Just like the past. In the past, we have made good choices and bad choices. And if we honestly look back at them, there was no other choice. There was no other choice in the sense, not that we didn't have options, but what we chose is exactly what we would have chosen. And whatever consequence it had is exactly the consequence it had. It couldn't be any other way. And that same principle applies to the seeming future also. And just because we are in the crossroads, it feels like that I need to come up with a solution for my own sake or for my own peace, let's say. It's not even about solving something. Sometimes it's just about that I just want to be over with it. I just want to have the clarity that, okay, this is it, and then not think about it anymore. And what if the destiny is that we will be thinking about it for, let's say, another day or week or month? So being able to entertain this possibility in a way that, okay, it's painful and it's my destiny to be experiencing this pain of confusion in this moment. And I don't know how long it is going to be there for, because we don't know. In this moment, something may click and a clarity may come, or clarity may not come for another however long. But if it's really possible for us to maybe not even happily, but just to accept the fact that I am stuck. Stuckness is here, and there's nothing I can do about it until there is something I can do about it. And how long that until will be is destined already. It's God's will, not my will. So first of all, let's just get that out of the way. But practically speaking, whether I am inclining towards a certain decision from out of suffering or out of a biological preference, the biological preference doesn't come with a load of what if it happens and what if it doesn't. So, okay, let me think of an example here. So let's say my mother and I, let's just take that random example. She wants me to be vegetarian and I enjoy my occasional non-vegetarian, for example. So let's say my mother says that you either become vegetarian or I cut you off the will or I won't talk to you anymore. I'm sorry, that's the best I can do in this moment as an example. So let's just pretend that this is the case. So she really is hurt by my choice of not following vegetarianism as she has devoted her life to, and she feels really hurt that her daughter won't live up to what she would have wanted her daughter to live up to. And now I am at a crossroads of that, well, do I quit eating non-vegetarian, which I so love and my body loves, and I know that my body is happy when it enjoys a certain amount of non-veg food, or should I give that up for the love of my mother or the approval of my mother in this case? And that approval doesn't really mean that it's the psychological need for my mother's approval, but that's just that because I would prefer her to be a part of my life and I would prefer for me to be a part of her life. So which one do I choose? So it's my biological preference to enjoy non-veg, and it's my biological preference to be a part of my mother's life. And until here, it's impersonal, it's biological. It's in a way, it's almost like mathematics. 2 + 2 is 4. There's no emotion put onto the 2 or the plus or the 4. So it is as it is. A hint that it's coming from psychological suffering is when I don't enjoy non-veg as much, but I'm just eating it to rebel from my mother, because there's something that I want to show her that I'm not her slave or whatever. So we play very subtle games where we are not choosing what we're doing out of the sheer preference of what we feel like doing, but we're trying to avoid something else, or we are attached to a certain outcome. So I eat non-veg, so she is affected by that. And maybe that's the kind of attention I need from her. So then my choosing to not quit non-vegetarian food is coming out of psychological suffering, because psychologically, I'm using that choice as the relationship dynamic that I need to maintain between me and my mother. Or what may happen is that I may quit non-vegetarian food and then I become the martyr, and then I put it over her head that I did this because of you. So this is just an example. There are many, many endless variations of this, of psychological versus biological. But just in this example, the choice is based on a sneaky little outcome that we're attached to, which we don't want to see sometimes. So that's how we know it's coming from psychological self and not biological preference. Because when it comes from biological preference, there is no, it's almost like curiosity. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm curious to know. And it's not coming out of already wanting to create an answer. It's like I say I'm curious, but I'm really longing for it to give me that particular answer, because that is what will satisfy my longing. So when we are really open, that we really don't know, from that not knowing, biological preference may emerge, because we probably have lost touch with it, just because there has been a very concrete psychological structure through which we have been living for so long. So just the honest curiosity of knowing that whether I'm coming from a biological preference or a psychological attachment is already the beginning of clarity, I would say. Like that's the right question to be arising within us. So it's just a matter of time that it unfolds deeper, and we may admit to ourselves that, you know what, I'm wanting to take that route because that route seems scary, or the consequence of that route just feels so unmanageable. But biologically coming to terms with the crossroads would be just coming back at the starting point, and just looking at my own attachments also, that why do I want to take this, or why do I not want to take that? And just sitting with that, not really trying to fix our attachments, really. Because as I mentioned before, that even if a decision is made out of attachment, it is destiny. So there's no lose-lose here. So it's not that if I take a decision from a place of attachment that I lost. No, that is exactly God's will through me. And it's okay. But if you're really trying to come back to our biological preference and not engage in the psychological suffering mechanism, just sitting back works most of the time, if it's available. And it's lovely that you said that you're not really feeling that burden of decision making, and yet there is a pondering going on upon what is the place that I'm trying to take a decision from. That's a lovely place to be in. It may not be pleasurable because it's very it can even feel like we're lost, but that is really the place where, so feeling lost, when the psychological self feels lost, is exactly the same place which is labeled as freedom in the absence of that psychological self. So what feels like, what's even going on, and when will I ever know, is actually the openness that we have been talking about for so long. It doesn't feel like openness yet because we are looking for an answer. And we as the person, as the seeker. And if it's possible to just sit back, let the seeker be, that lostness or that waiting may morph into and flower into the openness that we actually are looking for, without even knowing that we're looking for it. And as Ranko said before, and then we end up realizing that, oh, what I was looking for was already here. It's just that I felt like it is crossroads or feeling lost.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's funny that you said that, like this is also that time where it can have similarities with, because it's so strange. I'm feeling both at the same time. I'm feeling like a crazy amount of load, and also I can momentarily feel that this is actually freedom in a way. It's so strange. But yeah, that was good. That was really helpful. Very, very helpful. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, Timsy. Thank you for joining in. Shiv.
Hello, hi. You can hear me?
Yes, Shiv. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Not so good actually, but now good after the satsang. I was felt like it was related to very much to the stuff I was going through. And as you were talking about it, even before that, I was recollecting. Have you watched Star Wars?
I haven't, but I want to. And now that you have
Uh-huh.
named it, maybe I will.
Uh-huh. Oh, then I don't know how to explain this because I can tell you like roughly, okay. So the later parts of the movies that came were to do with this person called Anakin Skywalker. and it was his evolution into he was a sweet, innocent boy, and something about it. It was all like nothing, no load, and just enjoying, and even challenges he'd overcome in a very happy-go-lucky way. And then what happens is at one point, his mother gets killed in a very tragic way. And then he holds her mother in his hands, and then he feels in so much pain. And then he kind of commits to never letting this happen again. And at some point, he starts getting dreams of his wife also getting killed or dying, not getting killed, dying. And I think somewhere he recollected that tragic incident, and this time he didn't want to surrender it. Like he said, no way that can happen, and he was taking it into his control. And in that, he becomes like, from there, that moment, he moves into a route that goes towards full clenching and controlling and power and even blame, resentment, and it's something about that movie, like, and this evolution of from that sweet innocent child to someone so in pain and wanting to put others through pain and to dominate and to conquer and to avenge, and the pain that he goes through in that process himself while inflicting it on others, and all of this, it's like, so somewhere what I'm trying to ask is, the way you said it sounds like very, it's going to be a happy ending. It's like nothing, it's not that serious. But to me, it's like, I don't want to go that route. But if it's really predestined, I can't do something about it. But it's very painful, and a lot of horrible stuff happens. And so I've noticed somewhere that tendency to want to take control, like when you say unclench, I was able to now, but though I've heard other people talk about something similar, not exactly in the same words, but I wasn't able to practice it. And that fear was coming in. What if I lose control and it goes on that track and all hell breaks loose and I hurt myself, hurt others, and and that creates a kind of momentum. It sucks up your soul, that it weighs you down, how much pain you caused other people. And so all these things, like, uh, uh, that kind of gets in the way of me just softening, like the possibility of it being like that. And of course, if it's destined, then I can't do anything about it. But still, I want to be able to soften, but just the idea that it's not in my hands doesn't help. It makes it even worse. So I wanted to ask you.
Yes. It's wonderful that the way you're able to express what goes on within you, it's almost like that I'm there. So thank you for explaining it vividly for me. And yes, when we talk about, it's a wonderful word that you use, although I didn't use that word, but maybe I will now. Unclenching. That's a wonderful word. So when we talk about softening internally, when that happens, even that fear of me going south or me becoming the biggest supervillain, whatever idea I have of that being a supervillain, is also allowed, and not in practice. I'm not saying that I'll just pick up a gun and just go out and shoot everybody. If that's the destiny, then it's already happening. So if that's destiny, that will happen, or that would have already been happened. So the very reason that we are afraid that might be a possibility, is it possible to softening up to the fear of that being a possibility? Just
Softening up
internally.
to the fear.
And softening up in a way, like maybe just entertaining a question that, what if I were that? And not in a filmy way where I then, how they, in sci-fi movies, they show that you emerge as this, hero figure or villain figure, not like that. And both of them are here within us, that's for sure. But now the softening means softening to the possibility of both of them coexisting within us. So enlightenment doesn't mean all good. Divine doesn't mean all good. Divine means all there is. And all there is this spectrum of seeming duality, of pairs of opposites. So is it possible to soften up to that bad boy that was punished in childhood for being bad, or for not being obedient, or for answering back, or not studying well, or breaking a toy, or fighting with their sibling? So is it possible to really entertain the idea of softening up and not punishing the badness within us? And what if it's not bad to begin with? It's just what is arising. So
Like
what if
bad is kind of a very, what can you say, feaky kind of term. But what would you,
evil, you want to say?
not even evil, like cold, insensitive, cruel, and deriving pleasure from inflicting suffering on people. And evil is also doesn't capture it. It's very something about it. You're getting me, like I think
Yeah.
you do get, yeah.
Yeah. That fear of becoming that version of ourselves means that version is already within us. And there's no hiding from it. We have been hiding it in the closet so far. But if it's possible to, without attachment, without judgment, being able to see that, oh, I answered back in this conversation so that I can make them look smaller or bad or unintelligent. We do that in many ways. We have been doing it. It has been done to us. That's how we have learned. And we make fun of others, not innocently, not just for the sake of humor, but from this for the sheer subtle reason of feeling better than them.
Malice, in a way, that malice.
Yes, and we do that. But is it possible to really be aware of us doing it internally and externally? And being able to accept that this is how God has made me. This is my genes and up-to-date conditioning. It's not my doing that I've become what I am, good or bad. So malice is the word that you're using. So let's say, laugh. So I am walking and someone trips. Rather than helping them, I start laughing at them. But that is exactly my genes and up-to-date conditioning, not my doing. And this is only a concept until I can really sit back at the end of the day and soften up to the guilt of laughing at the other when they were in pain. So not only just softening up to the other who was in pain, not only softening up to our laughing at the other, but also the guilt or the shame that arises that is so strong sometimes that we don't even know, and it is shoving down that part of ourselves. And just because it is repressed and suppressed, it comes out even more sneakily in ways that we don't want to admit, and we would never admit to ourselves. So that softening is not really allowing for that part to start playing out and taking over our whole existence, but that softening is meant to allowing the space for that closet to be opened. And
how are these two different? What you just said, one is allowing it to take over completely, and the other is to just allow it. Once you allow it, you don't know what way it will go. It can take up completely.
Yes. Well, first of all, allowing it or not allowing it, and in what way it is allowed, is not in our hands. So first of all, let's laugh at that. But yes, a very good question. So there is a kind of allowance where I rebel from my goodness, and I'm like, I am just going to be all bad now. So it's like the pendulum. So right now we learned to just keep our eyes down, not really argue with anyone, and just keep going without causing any problem, let's say. Life was a certain way that it trained us to be this way. It's opposite within us, which we can call the shadow or the repressed narratives or structures or emotions within the system, trauma, we can call it, is still deep down in the system, which very unconsciously still plays out. So I may keep my eyes down, but within myself, I'm cursing you. So that part still plays out very, very alively in our daily life. So if allowing it means either I can keep my eyes up and then verbalize what's going on within me. So I may curse you verbally now. So that's letting it take over completely. And again, it's not that I choose to let it take over, or I choose to just allow it the second way that we're going to talk about. It may happen, it may not happen. And sometimes it needs to happen. Sometimes it needs to be verbalized. And if not in front of the person that it is about, maybe in a room, I put a pillow on my face and then just shout and curse, and it needs to be out of the system. So it's the only way to let it out doesn't need to be destructive. Because sometimes suppressing it, well, not sometimes, but actually always, suppressing it is even more destructive. Because that is really when it feels like it's uncontrollable. But if there is a way to process the negative that we are afraid of showing outwardly, if we find a way to really process it and channelize it in a way that the energy that feels to be of malice or hatred or resentment can just, so now when we say allowing it the second way, allowing it to be open, is to just let it arise within us. Because what happens as we seemingly become mature as spiritual seekers, or when the seeking apparently starts, we have this idea that we need to be all good, unconditional love, bliss, service, humility. So we hear these words and we feel like the opposite doesn't deserve to exist. So if I feel negative or anger or resentment or hatred towards myself or the other, oh shit, I've failed at enlightenment. So softening or opening means that allowing whatever is arising to arise. And not that it's I allow it to arise, it's just that there is no interference anymore to what is arising. So the anger may arise and I may feel a pressure in my head. And if let's say your process is meditation, you may just keep breathing and feel that. And at a certain point, if it feels too much, if you're alone, you can just shout it out or cry it out. There may be tears that come out of anger, or it just settles down, where you just drink a glass of water and you're like, oh, you know what? I'm just going for a walk. And then you stop letting it play. So anything may happen. Yes, go for it.
So this what you said, just leaving the situation, and that's something I can relate to. Like, you just want to be alone, but it's not always possible. Sometimes people catch hold of you even when you're just like leaving that situation, and then they can be at the receiving end of your madness. No?
Yeah. Have you heard about Nisargadatta Maharaj?
Yeah, I've heard of him. I don't know much, but I've heard, yeah.
So Nisargadatta Maharaj was the teacher of my teacher's teacher. So Roger Castillo's teacher, Ramesh Balsekar, and his teacher was Nisargadatta Maharaj, and he was known for his short-tempered nature. So he would be angry at people left, right, and center. He just had I think he called himself that I just have a short fuse, is how he said it. And the previous conversation that Timsy and I were having, so just being able to open up to understanding that what is coming from suffering and what is coming from the biological system. So what that means is that if that if whatever we are calling malice, if it is coming from that suffering mechanism, that psychological separate self, or is it just how I'm made? And
Like
in
about
a
this
sense,
also.
let me
Yeah.
finish.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
and
sure,
in
sure.
that sense, even the psychological self is my genes and up-to-date conditioning. So it's not separate from it. So even if that malice comes out on somebody, maybe it wasn't even about them, and they were just there, and it just became about, why did you put your shoe there? And it
Yeah.
wasn't even about that. So it just happened that way.
Mhm.
If it's really possible to see, maybe not in that moment, but let's say at night you sit back, you reflect on that event, and then you're like, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that. If it's really possible to sit back and see that them coming in that moment was not in your control, what was arising within you was not in your control, because you could have feeling joyful and you could have even hugged them if that was what was arising within you. But at that time, let's say it was malice or anger. So what was arising within you was not in your control. Them doing or saying or not doing or not saying something that hit you in a certain way was not in your control. And then you blurting out the anger or the malice to them in whatever way you did for, let's say, 10 seconds or 10 minutes was not in your control. And them responding or walking away or whatever happened after that was also not in anybody's control. So if it's really possible to sit back and seeing that it was destiny unfolding. So I'm gifted with, and I'm sorry, but really gifted is the word, even though it feels like, well, what kind of gift is that? But I am gifted, or I am designed with this anger that had to be delivered in that moment to other for their destiny to be fulfilled. And whatever I'm feeling as a result of that, let's say guilt, or let's say I forgot about it, whatever happens after that was my destiny. So now that I'm afraid that I don't want to become a person like that, is also destiny unfolding. So softening really means that even me being afraid of being that way, or me even being that way in a certain moment when I'm triggered, is not my doing. And that is what it means it's allowed. So internally, the closet to open doesn't have to be destructive outwardly. But if it is destiny for me to have a quarrel with someone or an argument with someone, sometimes it's needed. Sometimes I feel like, why did I even do that? And then if we feel that way, that why I shouldn't have done that, we can pick up the phone and apologize. And that's all. Whether they forgive us or not, or whether they hold on to it or not, that'll be their destiny.
Like one more thing I wanted to ask you about this, like what you said about even that chain of events, whatever happens, all of it is not in my hands. But I guess there's a difference when I know this firsthand, and there's a difference when I hear that and use that as an excuse. And again, can I use it as an excuse if it was predestined? I don't know. But somewhere I feel it's very important that I see it for myself. That really I have no say in this, that it's all impersonal, it's just a happening. And if I were to just take it on faith from you, it would somewhere something feels, something, I don't know what.
Yeah, it feels like as you said, I'm using it as a spiritual bypassing or an excuse in that sense. And that's absolutely valid. That's why this framework is so wonderful. It can be applied to anything and everything. And whether I know it firsthand in a given moment, or whether I use it as an excuse, or whether I completely forget about anything to do with this framework and I'm fully involved in the story, is also destiny. It's not my doing. So whether I remember it, whether I use it as an excuse, or whether I don't even, there are so many people who are not even aware that the possibility is that we are not the doers. And that is the key out of suffering. There are so many people who would say, oh, what is suffering? I'm not suffering. And they are the biggest unconsciously living people, not their doing. It's just how destiny has made their version of life or their story of life. And that is how our story of life was at a certain given moment. So from that version of experiencing life to this version of experiencing life, why not have faith and have surrender to the fact that if we have come this far, that the total acceptance, the total remembrance would not happen. So the softening really means on the seeking journey, it's okay to make mistakes. What does that mean? It's okay to forget. It's okay to come from a place of malice. And as soon as I realize that, it's okay to apologize also. And next time, maybe it'll be either shorter or it'll be less intense. And that can only happen only when we're not internally punishing ourselves from a load of guilt and shame. And again, whether we feel that load of guilt and shame is destiny unfolding. So let's not be hard on ourselves for feeling guilt. It's like, why don't I know better already? I already know guilt is suffering and I'm still feeling guilty about this. So that internal narrative is more suffering on the top of existing guilt. So whichever layer of that experiencing, if it is possible to soften to yourself, it's like, you know what, Shiv? It's okay. You made a mistake and I forgive myself. But that comes from a place of where I think I've done it. And there may come a time when I really am able to see that it wasn't my doing. And not out of a cynical way where I can just do anything and there's no consequence. It is really from a grounding where I see it's not my doing, and yet whatever the consequence will be is my destiny, and I gracefully accept it as life unfolding, as my destiny. So it's not out of pride where I am free of all consequence. Consequence is also unfolding just like the action unfolded. So yes, softening to ourselves for forgetting and for not being able to control and for controlling.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure, Shiv. Thank you for your question. Raj. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, Raj. How are you?
Fine. And you?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
And all the question that Shiv is, the doubts he has, the question he's asking, all these are predetermined as well.
That is the power of Sangha or Satsang. In this journey, we sometimes feel so lonely or so alone that, and then we end up judging ourselves like, who would ever feel like that? And that is the power of Satsang, where we can come in full vulnerability and openness, and we realize, oh, it's the same, and just different costumes, different storylines, but really the theme of the arising of our suffering is that one sense of doership and attachment to outcome. and different versions of it uniquely play in our unique systems. And when we come together and come in sharing of our deepest fears and patterns and vulnerabilities, we realize that we really are one.
So last time we discussed about reincarnation. Today, I would like if you can talk on what happens after death. Some teachers say after death, for the seeker, the ego dissolves. The ego is no longer there. So it is like enlightenment. Is it? Is it?
Who wants to know, Raj? Who wants to know? The one who's alive wants to know what happens after death. To me, and I'm very grateful to Roger for confirming and providing clarity on this for me also in my process of reconciling with the idea of death. All I can say about death is that this body will die. Gurleen will no longer exist whenever death happens. And if Gurleen can be okay with the fact that Gurleen as Gurleen is going to stop existing, then that is all that needs to happen for me to not suffer from the idea of death or the fear of death. So what happens after death, who knows? And how does it matter to Gurleen? Because Gurleen won't be there. So Gurleen can never know what happens after that.
Do you mean that when we die, the personal self does not exist, or neither the personal self no longer exists? It is just impersonal self that continues to exist. This is what you mean.
Well, yes.
It is like the personal self dissolve, and it's like merging with God, if you want. Become one, impersonal.
Yeah, you could say that in a way. However, what you are saying can also be experienced very much in a meditation experience. And that is pretty much what we call the ego death phenomena, which is labeled as ego death or personal self falling away. So that is very much also the case that while being alive, it is possible to experience the dissolution of the personal self, even momentarily or for a longer duration. However, when the body is dropped, what is known, just like in deep sleep, Gurleen doesn't exist, no experience exists. And then waking state happens, and then Gurleen is plugged in again. And then Gurleen knows that Gurleen was sleeping. But for all, oh, look at that. For all Gurleen knows, she was dead. But there is a clock that Gurleen has. So she looks at the time and says, oh, I slept at 11 and I'm awake at 6. So I was sleeping. And if she doesn't wake up, for all that knows, Gurleen is gone. So in that sense, death means end of experience for Gurleen, which means end of Gurleen because Gurleen herself is an experience. So yes, it can be said that death means dissolution of the person and just the impersonal remaining. But that's not for Gurleen to know, because Gurleen will be gone. Gurleen won't exist anymore. But if it is possible to come back from death and talk about it, I would love for someone to tell me. Because there are near-death experiences, and people really describe their experience very, very similarly. So it almost makes you believe that, or makes you understand that this is what happens when you're dying. But that there's a reason it's called near-death experience and not death, because even that experience does not know what death would look like.
Yeah.
So yeah, what happens after death, Gurleen doesn't know, and Gurleen doesn't need to know for peace of mind in daily living. But just enough that Gurleen won't be there.
So whether you are enlightened and you die, or you non-enlightened and you die, it is the same. It is
For
the
Gurleen,
same.
it's the same, yes.
Yeah.
For Gurleen, it's the same, but if we call about that, if there is some data that goes to a server and that comes back in some other person's life, then it's their problem. Or who knows, if this is a video game and if I die, something else wakes up, let's say, just like they show in sci-fi movies. Who's to say that that's not what's going on? So if I die, something else wakes up. So it's their problem to ask what happens after that, because Gurleen is gone.
Yeah.
So for end of suffering, this is actually a very useful concept that Roger delivered. And if it's allowed to enter the system, if it does enter the system, it makes sense that for fear of death to disappear, and to fear of life to disappear, I don't need to know what happens after that. If there can be reconciliation with the fact that Gurleen will stop existing and there will be no pleasure and pain anymore, which again would be a consequence of attachment to outcome dissolving. Because when Gurleen is not attached to pleasure and pain, so if there is no experience anymore, Gurleen can existentially be okay with that. So then who cares? Sometimes life is a drag. Who knows? It's probably better after death. Or not. We'll find out. We all will
Whatever
find
it
out.
is, whatever it will be fine.
And
It will be perfect. Yeah.
Well,
we can trust that. We can trust that.
or that's the thing, that this is something that we all inevitably will find out for ourselves.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the good thing about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Raj. You always come with such intriguing topics, and it's lovely to ponder upon them and to have a discussion about them and sometimes laugh at it. So thank you for always introducing insightful topics in our discussion. Thank you so much for such an alive conversation with many of you. It is a joy and just lovely to be able to connect in this way and to be able to open up with one another in a space which is designed just for this. So it fills my heart to see how the space flowers into what it flowered into right now. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your time. And I encourage you and remind you of that question that I left you with when we started our conversation, that openness, that beingness, thisness. Even after this call, just entertain the idea and be curious to see, when does it end? Does it become absent? Or is it choicelessly present? Presence itself. Thank you so much, everyone. Until next Sunday, I love you all. Bye for now.